5, solving absolute value equations. So before we get into actually solving the equations, we are going to refresh our memories and review a little bit of what absolute values are and how to solve them or evaluate those types of expressions. So for the first example, we have m plus 6, the absolute value of that, minus 14, if m is equal to 4. So everywhere we see m, we are going to substitute in 4 and then continue to solve the problem. So 4 plus 6 is 10, so we have the absolute value of 10 minus 14. And then we actually need to take the absolute value of 10. So remember, that is the distance from 0. So 10 is 10 units from 0. So the absolute value of 10 is 10 minus 14, which gives us negative 4. So for the first example, we get the solution of negative 4. I'm going to give you a few minutes here to try the your turn. Remember to please write your work down on your paper, pause the video, and then check back in when you're done to check your solution. All right, for this one, we need to do 23 minus the absolute value of 3 minus 4 times 2, because x is equal to 2. And then we have 23 minus the absolute value of 3 minus 8. The absolute value of 3 minus 8 is negative 5. So here a lot of students see those two negatives side by side and they automatically want to change it to a positive, but really we have to do the absolute value first. So the absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5, and then finally we have 23 minus 5, which is 18. So you should have gotten 18 for that first your turn. Now let's think about the absolute value equation. So let's consider the absolute value of x is equal to 4. So let's think about values that could have been in there for x. So when we do that, we say, well, it could have been positive 4, or it also could have been negative 4. We're not really sure here. So because of this, when we're thinking about the solutions to the equations, we have to make two cases. Okay, so two cases to solve our equations. So with this in mind, let's take a look at example 2. So we have the absolute value of f plus 5 is equal to 17. So again, we don't know what that f value was. It could have been two possible answers. So we have to make two cases. The first case, I keep exactly the same. The only thing is I do not need to put those absolute value rows anymore because we're actually solving it. So the first case is f plus 5 equals 17. The second case, everything stays the same except the right side of the equation. Since it's positive, we are going to put a negative 17 now. So there's our two cases, and then we solve each equation individually. So we have to subtract 5 from both sides in the first case. So 17 minus 5 is 12. So f equals 12 is one of our solutions. And then the second case, we have to subtract 5 again, but negative 17 minus 5 is negative 22. So there we have two solutions that could both work. So now let's check this to make sure it works. So if I substitute in 12 into the first expression, and I'm putting an equal sign above I'm putting a question mark above the equal sign because we're not really sure that the left side is equal to the right side. So 12 plus 5 is 17, and the absolute value of 17 is 17. So in our check, we did find out that 17 equals 17, so 12 must be correct. And now let's check negative 22 because maybe one of these solutions does not work. So we get the absolute value of negative 22 plus 5 equals 17, again with a question mark. Negative 22 plus 5 is negative 17. But then we have to take the absolute value of negative 17, so we get 17 equals 17. So both answers do work. All right, now on to this next problem. We have the absolute value of b minus 1 is equal to negative 3. Now, hopefully in your mind you're thinking, okay, I have the absolute value equal to a negative number. And can an absolute value ever equal a negative number? And if you're thinking no, you're 100% correct. So we can actually say for this problem, without even doing anything, that it's no solution because the absolute value, I'll just abbreviate, can never equal a negative. So we're going to say not equal a negative number. But what I want you to really get from this problem is, if you don't remember that, we're going to go through and solve this problem as if we forgot that even existed. So if I go through and do this, I get b minus 1 equals negative 3, and then I get b minus 1 equals positive 3, because we always have to change that right side. So I continue to solve. I get b is equal to negative 2, and over here I get b is equal to 4. But now let's go back and check our answers, because I got two solutions. So if I do negative 2 minus 1, does that equal negative 3? Well, I get the absolute value of negative 3 equals negative 3, but the absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3, and positive 3 does not equal negative 3. So we can count that answer out. If we do the same thing with 4, we get 4 minus 1 equals negative 3. So the absolute value of positive 3 equals negative 3. Positive 3, again, does not equal negative 3. So therefore, we have no solution. So take, again, a few minutes. Do both your turns. Please be very careful on them. Look at each question, and whenever you're done, check back and we'll go over the solutions. All right, so for the two your turns, we get y plus 2 equals 4, and y plus 2 equals negative 4. So y equals 2, y equals negative 6. And when you go back and check those solutions, they both do work. For part B, we can see the absolute value of 3n minus 4 is equal to negative 1. It's not allowed to equal a negative number, so we're going to put no solution. Again, if you went through and solved it, substituted your answers back in, neither result should work. All right, example 3. It says the temperature of an enclosure for a pet snake should be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take 5 degrees. Find the maximum and minimum temperatures. So if we know it should be 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it says give or take 5 degrees. So giving 5 degrees would be like adding 5. So that would be 85 degrees. And taking 5 would be going backwards and subtracting 5, which would be 75 degrees. So the maximum temperature would be 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and the minimum temperature would be 75 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, and finally, on to the second side of your paper, which is example 4. We're going to get into writing some absolute value equations. So we have to write an equation involving absolute value for the graph using this formula, and this formula is very important to us. It is not on your formula sheet, it's just something you need to know and remember how to do. So the formula says I have my x value, and that's always going to be x. I want to subtract the midpoint, and that will be equal to half the range of the ordered pairs on my number line. So for this problem, my numbers are 11 and 19. Those are my endpoints. So we have to first find the midpoint. So to find the midpoint, we simply add the two numbers, add the two endpoints, so 11 plus 19, and divide them by 2. So 11 plus 19 is 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So we know our midpoint is right here at 15. The second thing we need to find is our range. So to find the range of any set of numbers, you simply subtract them. So if you take the largest minus the smallest, it always becomes positive, but if not, you can put it in absolute values. So we're going to do 19 minus 11, which gives us 8. So now we have both pieces of information we need to write our equation. So we have the absolute value of x minus our midpoint, which we found was 15, equals 1/2, and the range was 8. So now let's do basic simplification, because we can simplify half of 8. So the absolute value of x minus 15 equals 4. And there we have our equation. If we were to go through and solve this equation, our solutions should be 11 and 19. So you have one last your turn to complete for your notes today, so please go through those problems, pause the video, come back and watch it whenever you're ready. All right, so our endpoints now are 4 and 18. So I'm going to go ahead and write down the formula I need. I need x minus the midpoint equals 1/2 the range. So let's find the two things we need. So the first thing we need is our midpoint. So the midpoint, to find that, I'm going to take our endpoints, add them together, divide by 2. So 4 plus 18, we get 22 divided by 2, so our midpoint is 11. Second thing we have to find is our range. So simply subtract our two endpoints. So 18 minus 4 is 14. All right, so we have both sets of our data. So now we need to write our equation. So the absolute value of x minus the midpoint, which we found was 11, is equal to half the range, so half of 14. So our final answer is absolute value of x minus 11 equals 7. All right, so now that you're done, just review these practice problems or these notes, and then you can start your practice work.